Okay, so good day, everybody. Welcome to Python Class 1 under Electronics and Logic. I am your facilitator. For context, I will be saying my name, but I assume you already know my name. It's Oluwatobiloba Daniel Davis. And basically, welcome to our class. This is our first class, so today we'll be going through getting started with Python, data types in Python, variables and assignments, and finally print statements. So this class will just serve as an introductory sort of lesson to Python as a programming language. So first, what is Python? Python is a programming language, as we already know. It is dynamically typed and it is an interpreted language. Now, I will not be explaining all these nomenclature, but just understand that Python is a very versatile programming language. It finds applications ranging from GUI development to most famously machine learning, data science. If it can be done in programming language, it can be done in Python quite simply. So it's quite simply the programming language I recommend the most for anybody, whether beginners, intermediates, or experts. So how do we get started with Python? To get started with Python, you need majorly three things. You need three things. One, you need the Python interpreter. You can download that from the web. Just search Python interpreter, then download the latest version. Two, you need a Python file. A Python file is marked with the extension .py. That's how you know it's a Python file. So you write Python code within a Python file. You write it within the Python file, but you need a third thing. That thing is a code editor. Yes, a code editor. Your code editor, my code editor of choice is VS Code, but yours could be JetBrains IDE. It could be even text editor, something like that. So just get yourself the Python interpreter. Although VS Code has something we call extensions, which you can use to run Python without the interpreter, but I recommend you get the interpreter on your local machine if you are going to. You would most likely use command line tools, so you definitely need it installed on your local machine, and then your Python file, and then your code editor. So that's how you get started with Python. Okay, so let's move on to the second thing. Second thing is data types in Python. Now, we all know what data is, right? Data is simply information or raw unprocessed information. But in this scenario, let's look at it as information. We know something, right? We have information about something, but we're trying to represent it. Now, how do we represent it in Python? That's where data types come in. So in Python, we have, I think, 7 data types. I could be wrong. I think integers, strings, booleans. These 3 are your primary data types, or rather your simple data types. Then you have lists, tuples, dictionaries, and sets. Yeah, there could be more I'm not aware of, but these are the basic ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Beautiful, there are 7, like I said, although I could be wrong. So like I said, these first 3 are your simple data types. They usually do with single objects. These are your, let's call them collections, because they usually deal with 2 or more simple data types together, trying to find a relationship between them or store them as one. That's where you get these remaining 4 data types. So let's just go over them quickly. So integers are your counting numbers. Your integers are your counting. There could also be decimals, though. There could also be yes, floats. That's what we call them. If they are decimals, they are floating numbers. So there could also be floats, but just know that integers are your numbers, e.g. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. Then next you have your string. Your strings are your characters, or rather a combination of characters. That's where you get strings. Oops, I misspelled numbers here. So strings are a combination of characters. Let's say a person's name, like my name, Toby. Let's say your class. Let's say you're in grade 5 or something like that. That is your string. A string is simply a combination of characters. Now, if you notice, I am putting them within quotations. That's how you characterize a string. A string is found within quotation marks. Okay, I hope that makes sense. These quotes could of course be single quotes or double quotes. So you could also have something like house. That's also a string. Okay, as long as it's within quotation marks, whether single or double, there are strings. So now let's look at the fourth type, or rather the fourth sorry, the third simple data type in Python. We have booleans. Now booleans are of two examples, or rather they have two types. They are either true or false. So you can think of true or false as yes or no, positive or negative, zero, or in terms of computers, zeros and ones. So booleans express the states, or rather if something about an information you know is actually true or false, if it's correct. So if I ask you, have you eaten today, your answer to that would be a boolean, either true or false. Yes, I've eaten. No, I've not eaten. Now, how do you denote these in Python, or rather how do you write these in Python? Like I said, this is an integer. Something like my name is a string, and your booleans, let me just write this down, true, comma, false. Your booleans could be either true. If you notice, it's a keyword. It comes in a different color. I don't know if it's visible, but anyways, it's either true or false. These two are your booleans. So this is your string, this is your integer, this is your string, these are your booleans. So that's a simple overview of data types in Python. Of course, the other data types are there, the collections that I told you about, the lists, tuples, dictionaries, and sets. But that's not a concern for now. We're just looking at simple data types, and that's where we'll build upon, and then maybe in later courses or later classes we'll look at the collections. So that's just a simple overview of simple data types in Python. Okay, now let's look at the third thing on our itinerary, variables and assignments. What are variables? Variables are simply containers. We can think of variables as containers. Of course, in mathematics, variables are things that can take on a whole host of values. In maths, we usually use x as our variable of choice, although it could be anything. Same thing in Python. Variables are containers that can take on any value you want it to be. Any value you want it to be, as long as it is a valid data type within Python, because information can only be expressed as data types in Python. So to use a variable, it can be anything you want it to be, and it can hold any one of these data types as its value. How do we give it a value? That's where assignment comes in. So let's say we have a variable called name that is used to hold the name of a person. Let's say my name. If I were to give this variable a value, because currently it's just there. The thing about Python, like I said earlier, is dynamically typed. So you do not need to declare a variable before using it. In other languages like JavaScript, you would see something like let name. You see something like that, right? But in Python, you do not need to declare a variable before using it. You do declaration and assignment at the same time. Now, let's go back to our variable name, right? It holds my name. How do I give it a value? I use the equal to operator. It's used to give something a value. That's where assignment comes in. That's what assignment means. So by using the equal to, we are simply giving name a value. Now what value? Let's give it a string. What string? Let's give it my name, Toby. So doing this, we have given our name variable a value. And if you hover over this, you see beautiful variable name, literal Toby. So that's the value I've given it. Of course, you can, like I said earlier, a variable can hold any value as long as it's a valid data type. So let's say we have okay, age. Age, of course, is an integer because it's a number. Your age is always an integer, which is a number. So let's say 75. This age variable is holding the value 75, which is an integer. Let's look at has eaten, a variable that is signifying whether we have eaten or not. So let's make this true. Okay, now it's holding a boolean. So simply put, a variable can hold any value, as long as it's a valid data type within Python. Now, variables are very, very wonderful. They are magical, but we have some rules we have to abide by when declaring variables. So these rules are basically, I think there are 3 or 4 in number. Okay, I think there are 3 or 4, but I'll just say them off the top of my head. So rule 1, your variable name can consist of letters, numbers, and some symbols, some specific symbols, not all symbols. but it can't consist of space or white space. Yeah, let's call it white space. Let's call it white space. That's the more correct term to use in this case. Let's call it white space. What does that mean? So notice that I put an underscore here. You would have asked me, why didn't I just say has eaten? Well, Python throws you an error. The interpreter rather, or the IntelliSense throws you an error that statements must be separated by new lines or semicolon. Just forget about that. The real problem here is if you are Python treats these two things as different entities. Okay, it treats these two things as different entities. So if you have like a group of words, let's say has eaten or is walking or something like that, they are trying to declare as a variable or you are trying to give as a variable name, you would need to separate them, or you use what we call camel case. Now let's look at separating them. How do you separate them? You separate them using an underscore. Notice how Python doesn't throw us an error here because underscore, that's fine. So instead of white space, you use underscores to separate words. Use underscore to separate words. Now, another way that I said we could do it is using what? Camel case. Now, what is camel case? Now, camel case simply means this is a combination of two words, right? So how do we denote them if we are not going to use underscore, if you want them joined together? You simply make the first letter of each new word capitalized. That's what camel case is, okay? And this is perfectly fine. So your variable name cannot consist of white space. You either use underscores to separate them or you use camel case to separate it. Now that's just one rule. I think that's a combination of two rules, but let's look at the third rule. The third rule would be your variable name must not be a function or a keyword. Now, what are function and keywords? You might not know that now, but once we go for that, you would understand what they are. But just know that your variable name cannot be a function word or a keyword. That would be an error. Or rather, that would not be an, I don't know, sometimes it doesn't give you an error, but it's just not right to do that, okay? It shouldn't be a function word or a keyword. Most times you get an error. And then finally, the fourth rule is that your variable name must be descriptive. It has to be descriptive, okay? Has eaten in this case is very descriptive because it's signifying whether I've eaten or not. Now, what if I just said he as my variable name? What does that even mean? It's even he. What does he even mean? I'm trying to signify if I'll be eating or not, and I'm using he as a variable name. It's not descriptive at all. I would understand it, but anybody else trying to read my code would kind of be confused by that naming convention. So always make your variable name descriptive. By the way, I forgot to tell you, these hashtags that I am putting, it's how you comment in Python. So comments do not get run alongside your code. It's just like you are note taking in Python, trying to explain what you are doing. So it's a fun way of listing down your ideas or trying to explain what each line is doing, etc., etc. So that's what comments does. You use hashtags, then you can start typing your comments out. So that's another thing. Okay, so that's basically variables and assignments. I would touch reassignment when we enter print statements now, but that's basically variables and assignments, or anything about variables and assignments in Python.